Hello everyone and welcome to One Take CEO Interviews. I'm Dale Kirshner. Today we're with Kyle Cockey, who is co-owner and CEO of Cockey Trucking out in Buffalo Lake, Minnesota. They have about 260 employees and operations in Minnesota and Florida, which this time of the year I'm very envious about the Florida operations. But Kyle, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about your operation. We know you're trucking, but tell us what kind of trucking and how does that compare with some of the other companies that we might think of?
So we're in almost exclusively food grade goods and pharmaceuticals. So if you're going to the grocery store today, there's a good chance that we've touched, especially the perishable side of the things in the grocery store. So think meats and produces and things on the outer side of the grocery store.
So now, there are spot contract trucking companies, and then there are those that have like long-time customers. Where do you fall into that mix?
We're almost exclusively the opposite. We're long-term contracts. So about 92% of our business is done with the same dozen companies.
So how has COVID-19 affected you then when you have those long-term relationships? And I heard things got kind of a little crazy in the last 9 months.
They got incredibly crazy. So COVID's changed the way that we consume food. So grocery stores are incredibly busy. Fast food went through a valley and on its way back. Sit-down dining has never been the same. And all of them are our customers. So trying to figure out how to balance that has been incredibly interesting. And then as we've gotten further away from the onset of it, trucking has become much more in demand. So now it's a completely different book to juggle all in the same year.
So how have you done that then? I mean, you were wired a certain way. What did you guys have to do to be able to kind of unwire that way and then recalibrate?
The honest truth is you had to be incredibly transparent with everybody in the network. Had to tell them the struggles you're having, what's going on with what you're missing and why things are happening and what you're looking at. So we've always run with an open book, and thank goodness, our customers can ask us any question about how we do things at any time. And it's been very easy to make that transition, but very difficult to execute it.
So did you lose sales at all then in the first part of the year? How have you been doing from a revenue and profitability standpoint?
So when COVID was announced, we actually went incredibly busy because of the rush buying that took place. Then once everybody's pantry ended up filling, we ended up going slow, and now we've come back strong. So in the end, the sales will be slightly down, and that's expected. Our margins aren't as good as we'd like, simply because of all the disruption in the network, but they're improving as we go forward too.
When we talked on the phone about getting together and doing this interview, you mentioned something about the difference between skill and luck and a business card. Tell us a little bit about that.
I've always said that the luckier I get, the better I look, and there's instances where a left business card with a place that you would never think would come out to be any good would come back to pay a visit. So think of my grandfather always telling me never burn a bridge or never turn away a conversation that may one day matter. And in this particular year, a prospect that had been on my prospect list forever turned into a customer just because of all the changes that are taking place.
So did the person just call you then?
Oh, absolutely. And said we exchanged cards. He even knew when, so said he made a note on the back of it, and it was a significant amount of time ago. And because of that conversation and because of COVID, timelines have changed. And a normal setup process can be weeks and months. In this case, we got it done in less than a week, and we started going to work. So.
Now, I mentioned in the beginning you have about 260 employees. How have you managed the situation with COVID-19 with them? And has it been different at all between your folks in Florida and your folks up here?
So distance has been an interesting challenge of leadership before COVID, and it's actually become a positive after. the distance of our operations staff between 1,500 miles means that if we have an issue in one office, I still have one left. So office-wise, it's actually been fairly fluid. The driver side has been a complete nightmare. I mean, 2020 will be customers closing down their restrooms where our drivers had nowhere to go. Many of the roadside rests, you never could, light vending was shut down. And some cases, even the restrooms there were hard to find. And, and then, of course, with our drivers being distanced, making sure they had the supplies of masks and hand sanitizers and all them things. We've put more time, effort, and dollars into it to just make sure that we're making sure that we can do everything we can to make sure they're safe. So I wish I had all that time back. I could have done so many different things, but it was well invested with the betterment of our people.
So what did your drivers have to do during that period of time? And for how long was it that they'd be going on the interstate and there was almost no place to stop?
Well, believe it or not, my operations team made many calls that we typically wouldn't make just to try to alleviate some planning for that driver. You can park overnight here. It has facilities. We'd call customers, ask if we could park there, if they had anywhere, any accommodations for the driver. So we probably transferred about 3 to 5 people into our operations team just in order to manage what was a completely moving target. That lasted about 90 days, and then it kind of settled out, and it's kind of been the same since. Now, who knows what we're about to walk into again.
And then how about wearing masks? That became a political issue.
Too bad
and
it did,
some people were like, I'm not wearing a mask. Other people were like, why am I not wearing a mask?
Yep.
How did that work its way through your employees?
So for the drivers that are remote in front of our customers every day, we just got a mask outside the truck policy. Mm-hmm. So anytime they're not on our property but on the road but outside the truck, they have to have a mask on. That allows us to just remove the political element of it. I have some that tell me I'm infringing some freedom that they have, and I acknowledge that the party they represent probably is mine too, but in this particular case, we're going to make sure we do what we need to do to be customer-centric. So that's been accepted in that matter that we've done that. Some grumble a little more, some are more understanding. Thankfully, having many offices in 2 different states, we've been able to position all of our staff 6 feet apart. So, and we've got a really flexible arrangement, just like every company in America. We've checked VPNs and work from homes, and heck, on this given day, I think 50% of my people are not here at corporate today. So that's worked out as good as ever. I joke that many times the worst investment is a semi-truck, but I won't want to own commercial real estate in tomorrow's market because all my employees are going to be trying to figure out how to work from their living room instead of my office. So,
how many trucks do you have?
210 semi-tractors, 350 semi-trailers.
And then how many of those are owned versus leased?
160 owned, 50 leased. All trailers are owned by the company.
Okay. And then from a debt perspective right now and a balance sheet perspective, how are you doing on that front?
Well, we just bought a company in 2019, so we intentionally took a leverage position. Thankfully, we've been able to continue to delever as 2020 has went on, even with all the challenges that we've had. So we're sitting pretty good. We're, like I said earlier, we're only a little behind margin anticipations that we had for 2020, and with everything given, I'm calling that a win.
Good. Probably about 6 months ago, well, I think it was actually pre-COVID, we talked about the trucking industry and logistics and what's coming from a logistics perspective. What do you see coming in the next few years and other people should maybe be aware of for their businesses?
Well, there's a big change coming somewhere. The timing of it is ever so sensitive, very much like the moment that we're going to not drive our car anymore. That technology is going to come to our truck. It's just a matter of when, and it's a matter of how it's going to come into the industry. Where will be the first section to get affected, but driver light trucks will come. I think I'm old enough that I'm not probably, if you can't fly an airplane without a pilot, probably won't see a truck without a driver. Not to some degree at least, but the early stages of that technologies are already being deployed on our trucks. We got the rear end collisions, just like many cars do. We got the lane assistance. So those are all going to roll up to some form of an interstate autopilot. Should also allow us to become incredibly more efficient with our equipment once that comes. So that'll be a huge undertaking. I would assume it would be probably the second coming of change, similar to a deregulation that I don't remember in the early 80s.
Okay. How about logistics? Planning what I need to get from A to B. How is that going to be changing?
Well, it's already changing today. We've got what we call digital marketplaces, where people like companies are making technology to allow freight to exchange quicker, easier, and smoother, or that's at least the billing of it. That comes with challenges too. In the marketplaces that those work, there's nothing that'll stop that exchange. So it's changed the way the relationship is managed to get our freight to where it is. In many ways that's fantastic, and not all ways that's great. Some of them distance me further from the customer, and both the customer who pays my bill and the end consumer. Those bother me, so we have to figure out how we're going to get through them, and I don't have that answer how that's going to be yet.
So they're trying to go more direct right to you rather than going to kind of a middle person?
Actually, the middle person's now becoming a computer, and they're between the customer and I. And some of those exchanges are controlling the communication, whereas today it might be with the customer and me direct. And they're not quite yet fine-tuned. So something will look different as we go down that road. And then there's a litigation thing in our industry, just like there is in our general society, and to try to figure out who's going to carry what litigation as this change on both logistics and trucking comes down the pike. It's going to look terribly different, and I'm not quite sure how.
I don't think people sometimes understand the dynamics behind trucking. And how are you doing with talent attraction and retention? It almost sounds like some of your talent needs to change too with these changing times. So how do you help your existing talent get the education they need to kind of come up to that level? And then how do you find the new talent?
So the talent as far as the non-driver is relatively similar, just trained differently. More training, more digital, more computer, more interchange, less voice. Can joke as I'm in between the generations, it's golden for the new generation coming up because that's how they love to communicate. So as much as I like to joke about me not understanding that generation, they're going to be in the center of that, so we better figure it out. The driver side specifically, the driver of yesterday that didn't own a cell phone, didn't have to run any technology, didn't have to do anything. We have to figure out exactly how we can elevate at least a few skills that aren't traditional driver jobs, and some of them won't transition. So depending on how fast that transition goes, some will transition out rather than transition to the new role. And then we have to figure out what our new breed of driver demands of the job, because the long haul truck driver is a very difficult job, and some of the younger generations are saying no more. So what does that mean? Does that mean two drivers exchanging halfway through and doing things of that? And many of those things will change just because of the escalation that changes through.
I would imagine communications has changed a lot. You used to be able to give somebody a clipboard and say, go to this destination. Now, there's so much more going on. How do you deal with communicating to your employees in the different areas that they operate?
I've only been doing this 20 years, and there isn't a single thing of communication that is the way it was 20 years ago. And you look at that closer, there's not a heck of a lot that we do the same 5 years out. So, today you're sending the route to the truck on an onboard computer, depending on the driver and the calibration and the skill set. Now all of a sudden we can put nav right on the dash for that driver. We can put safe havens that we're dispatching them to. We can put all their routing information to it. We now collect all that digital information from the truck, and we can communicate it without a person to the customer. We can offer rolling ETAs to know when a truck falls behind. The sophistication has gotten so high, and the only trouble that comes with that is sometimes we're replacing data in lieu of a relationship. I'm stuck between the way my father did it and the way that's coming, and trying to figure out what that means so that you make sure that you take care of the relationships and the specific things of that customer. It's easy to get caught up with what's going on and forget about the root, and rest assured we don't forget.
How do you keep your customer service up to date then? Thinking about what you just said, how do you make sure they're kind of staying in front of those kinds of situations?
So each customer has a different demand, and each customer service rep is expected to meet those demands, and they're getting harder. Mm-hmm. We still can have a load of cucumbers in the right spot at the right time and delivered, but we've failed to communicate the proper updates of its transit. And in the eyes of some customers, that's now a failure, even though we've done everything exactly the way it is. So it's more demanding than ever, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
So think about all that. What is your goal with your company? Do you want to make more acquisitions? Or at some point, would you like to be acquired?
So the honest reality is I'm the end of the third generation. The fourth generation has their first employee here. However, we intentionally run our business as a business, not a family business on that side. That allows us to be nimble to the marketplace. No matter how we decide it, we're just trying to get through COVID. Let's make sure we get that straight. But the economies of scale are incredibly large in our industry, and our technology is going to only increase them, not decrease them. So we're either going to have to continue to grow or become part of somebody at some point during the future. It's that simple. I don't know that that's always good. I told my brothers and my mom and dad when they were alive, when I agreed to take this generation, that the moment that I couldn't remember every employee's name would be the moment that probably would be the end of my term, just because of the way I lead. Well, I'm getting closer. With only seeing drivers every 4 or 5 times a year to each driver, there's an occasional one that comes through the office and you go, darn it, there I am a little closer. So study my Dale Carnegie to try to remember all my names and figure out what that is. So today's not the day, but we either have to grow or be acquired at some particular point in the future.
What do you plan for 2021? I know that's like crystal ball question, but how are you planning for the next year?
Well, we're planning as if COVID doesn't give us the roller coaster it did in 2020. And frankly, if you're in my industry, you're planning for a really good year. The supply and demand is tightened. The networks have gotten more solid, putting us more in demand, should allow margin increases in 2021. 2021 should be a good year in my industry.
Along those lines, are there any opportunities to make acquisitions from companies that have not weathered the storm as well as yours?
There will be lots of movement in our industry. There will be family-owned companies that are ending their end without a next generation, and COVID's going to accelerate them looking for the exit. There's going to be ones that weren't as fortunate by what industries got affected more in COVID, and they're going to be looking to find somebody else's balance sheet to help them weather. There will be exits, acquisitions, opportunities in the time ahead, no question.
Great. Kyle, what question should I have asked you today that I didn't ask?
Why Bleeding Blue? My mom and dad had a way of leading that my brothers and I grew up in, and we never defined it until about 4 years ago. And with everything going on with the police, we maybe would have preferred a different term than Bleeding Blue, but our trucks are blue. So Bleeding Blue it is, and it really just defines everything that a family business, and especially ours, stands for: family values, dedication, loyalty. And one interesting tidbit is with a remote workplace, the one interesting thing that came with a tagline that defines who we are is I'll have a 2-minute conversation with an employee, and they'll say Bleeding Blue before I will, which is the most opportune compliment that we can have. So Bleeding Blue it is.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
I appreciate it.
And I hope everything goes well in 2021 and beyond.
I'm looking forward to it.